The National Association of Police Athletic Activities League's youth organization welcomes you to its From the Voices of Youth virtual town hall series presented by Microsoft and supported by Extended Stay America. We thank you as well as our panelists for joining today's town hall event and anxiously look forward to having some great discussion and learning from each other, all in the name of youth. So now let's get started and meet today's panelists.
And we got to come together as a people.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's another great evening, another great opportunity to be able to host another National PAL from the Voices of Youth event coming to you live from New Orleans. And I think we have a great panel set up for everyone to interact and engage with. Before we get started, I would like to remind those that are participating, if you have a question and you'd like to have a question considered to be asked, to please place it in the chat and we'll take a look and see and try and get to as many of those as possible. But with that, again, I want to thank Microsoft for their sponsorship and their support, as well as Extended Stay America. But most importantly, I as well want to thank our youth that are participating this evening, because this is their evening. This is their opportunity to have a voice and to be involved and engaged. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our lead. He's not so much a youth, but I'm going to turn it over to our lead youth moderator, Nathan Mason. Take it away. Let's meet tonight's panelists. How about it?
Good evening and welcome to the National Activities/Athletic League. Today for our panel, we will have the panel introduce themselves with the student leaders.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm a freshman at UNC Chapel Hill.
I'm William Bostic. I currently attend St. Augustine High School. I'm in the 11th grade.
My name is Zion. I attend Warren Easton. I'm in 11th grade.
My name's Brandon, and I'm a freshman at Tulane.
My name's Leon. I'm a junior at St. Augustine High School.
And now we will have our guest speakers introduce themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have Mayor Cantrell is not able to. She had a last-minute conflict and is unable to join us tonight. So with that, we'll go from superintendent to deputy superintendent, judge, and so forth.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Ferguson. I'm the superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department. I'd like to thank you and welcome you to the New Orleans chapter of this panel discussion. I'd like to thank our panelists for assisting us with this program. Thank you, Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. My name is Ofa Sandifer. I am the Deputy Superintendent of the Professional Standards and Accountability Bureau here within the New Orleans Police Department. Welcome, the youth panel, and we look forward to having this engagement.
Is Judge Ben on?
He should be on, yes.
Okay. We'll come back to him. Is
I'm here.
You
Can you
there?
hear me?
Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, Judge.
Thank you, Brother Hood. I'm Benedict Willard, and I'd like to thank everyone for participating this evening. Hopefully, we'll have a very good discussion. I'm a judge here at Criminal District Court, where I've been now going on 18 years, former chief, and currently I'm the second longest serving judge across the street at Tulane and Broad. So I'm happy to be a part of it, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Anthony? I think he's on.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Oh, all right, my bad. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
My name's Anthony Morrow, Charlotte, North Carolinian. Played in the NBA 10 years. One of those years I played in New Orleans. I have family in New Orleans. And in my 1 year, I grew to really start getting connected with the community. And, you know, it really kind of helped spark my, you know, my philanthropy side in terms of my foundation, Anthony Morrow Foundation, and Anthony Morrow Charities. And we, I mean, a lot of the same conversations that, you know, everywhere people been having right now with social injustice, we've really been active with that in Charlotte. And when Mr. Hood, who's my mentor, brought me in on this conversation, I was honored just because I do have ties in New Orleans, and I was getting closer and closer with the community. So appreciate y'all for having me on here.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Mason, it's on you. You need to introduce yourself, and then we can get started with our young people asking and having some conversation and questioning. Turn it to you.
Good evening again. My name is Mason Horn. I'm a freshman at Hampton University of Hampton, Virginia, and we're going to get started with the first question. This question is directed to Superintendent Sean Ferguson. And the question is, if the George Floyd incident would have occurred in your city, how would your department have handled it?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Horn. Let me see. Here in New Orleans, we're kind of superstitious, but we're not. I would venture to say, I would hope and pray that that would have never happened here in New Orleans. One reason is because we have a program called EPIC, Ethical Policing is Courageous, which is a mandate for our officers to intervene when they're seeing misconduct by another officer, no matter the rank. I, as a superintendent, can be influenced or intervened by a patrolman, saying, hey, you know, this is not who we are. This is not how we conduct ourselves. However, you know, you can't ever say never. So as such, you know, first thing we would have to look at is what triggered this. But before any and all things, I would have to offer an apology to that family and ensure them that we would do a thorough and transparent investigation and go through that process, in which we have whenever an officer is involved in any critical incident. But I like to lean on and trust in my department in saying that we just would not have allowed that to happen from one another, because we hold each other accountable for all of our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. And now we will go to our first student of our student panel, and they will lead us off with the first question that they have. Also, students, before you start, please state who the question is directed to. Thank you.
Hi, my first question is directed to Superintendent Ferguson, and my question is, why does NOPD use tear gas when international law bans its use in war?
Thank you for that question. So that tear gas is a tool that is used by Special Operations Division when necessary, only when necessary. So it is not the same grade as the military grade that has been banned by the UN, I guess you would say, but it is a grade that is an irritant towards anyone when and if impacted by it, but it is not the same grade that has been banned by the military in itself. And what we have done as such, as a result of us using it most recently during a protest this one time, we had not used it in over 20 years here in New Orleans. So we created an internal policy, standard operating procedure or protocol, in which we're only going to use it in life or death situations as a last resort. We will not use it hastily. We will not use it without thought. We will not use it without the proper notification or authority or permission given, meaning by myself or my designee.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. Now we will go to the second student on our student panel. Remember, please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
Personal question towards Superintendent. I had heard that a lot of other police departments had been asking questions on how to deal with certain situations around what's been going on in the news, and I just want to know what kind of advice you've given.
You mean in the protests of the civil disturbances when you're asking about that advice on how to address that or how to deal with that? Is that the question you're asking? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get clarity.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good deal. Yeah. So I mean, we have what I'm proud to say of our department right now. We have been for quite some time the leading agency in crowd control due to Mardi Gras being hosted in New Orleans and various other major events such as Sugar Bowl and Super Bowl. So we are known for our crowd control tactics, and as such, we have been contacted as to how were we able to have so many peaceful protests since the George Floyd murder, as opposed to what you're seeing across the country. And I think that starts with community relationships. We have a great relationship with our community. We are a very diverse community, from Mardi Gras Indians to the Mardi Gras Crews to the LGBTQ to whomever. We are a very diverse community, and we as a department are engaged with each and every facet or every community that we are serving. So when we begin to have the conversations of a protest or things of that nature or an organized, everyone has the right to exercise their First Amendment right. So what we try to do is identify the leaders or the organizers and say, hey, how can we assist you so that this can be peaceful, so you can exercise your constitutional right, but in a peaceful manner? And that has been the key to our success: community relationship and community engagement.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you again, Chief Sean Ferguson. The next question will be from our student panel, once again from Brandon Stokes. Please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
My question is directed towards the judge. Do you believe that the cash bail system creates a two-tier justice system in which the poor are more likely to be detained pre-trial?
Okay. That's a very good question. And let me say, before I get into the heart of it, several factors go into a person's bail once it's set. Well, first of all, we need a very good understanding of what's the purpose of bail. And essentially, bail is not to punish, but bail is basically to ensure that a person who's accused of a crime will return to court. There are several factors that a judge has to consider before an appropriate bail is set in a matter. Those things include whether or not the person is employed, whether or not the person has ties to the community in which he was arrested, whether or not it involves a crime of violence, whether or not there were multiple victims involved, is the person a flight risk? And as of late, we judges have to now contend with something coming from the public defender in terms of their motion, in that they bring up the pandemic and the risk of people who are now incarcerated. And the news has shown, and in fact, we've had some discussion even as late as today, that there have been spikes with this very dangerous virus in jail. So we have to consider all of those factors in terms of setting what's known as an appropriate bail. Again, the purpose of bail is to not be a punishment, but it has to be appropriate under the circumstances. And I do understand that, I guess your question sort of begs the issue of pay for play. If you can afford it, can you get out? If you can afford it, are you connected enough to get out, whereas someone else might deserve an opportunity to get out for the same type of offense? I can't answer for all judges, but I certainly can answer for myself. There's something also known as an ROR. That's a release on your own recognizance. And if you understand the system, that doesn't involve one thin dime. It's basically a signature bond, and it's utilized many, many times in my particular courtroom and during my tenure. Now, there are some crimes that prohibit the use of an ROR, and I'll touch on that more when we get to other questions. But any crime that involves a gun, a person is prohibited from receiving an ROR. Any crime involving a crime of violence, anything involving domestic violence, even if in fact it's a misdemeanor, a domestic violence particular arrest involves the need for some type of cash or commercial bond. So what happens is we have to all, as judges, look at the totality of circumstances in setting an appropriate bail. Now, I've set bail as low as $100 in some instances, and I do receive the issue that you're talking about, because whether it's $100 or $1, some of the homeless people can't afford it. But again, it's not meant to be punishment. It's only meant to be reasonable under the circumstances. So when you start talking in terms of cash, I want you to understand that there are other issues involved. So, and to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter if you're wealthy and you're connected. You're probably gonna make bail unless there's some circumstances that a judge needs to consider as being a flight risk or a danger to the community itself. But I don't really see where there is a two-tier system, where there are those who can afford to pay and those who can't, at least in my particular courtroom. And I'll also say this to you: it is not uncommon and it is not unheard of for a lawyer, be it a public defender or a private attorney, to come in after bail has been set to file a motion to reduce the bail. Because again, they may prove and show that their client is unable to make that $100 bail. And I'll have to consider the other factors that I talked about. Is the person a flight risk? Is it a simple matter? If it's something that's simple, even if they don't ask me. There've been times where on the record, I'll just grant an ROR because I don't think it's fair to keep that person in jail under those circumstances. But again, I like the question. I don't see where, but I don't really see in my courtroom and in my view, because I try to treat things as equal and just across the board. I don't really differentiate between the well-connected and the well-financed versus the person who may be homeless. So again, I appreciate the question, but again, there's not really a two-tier system, at least in Section C. All right? I hope I answered your question. No, I don't need it. What do you need?
Thank you from the
Mason?
court, Judge. And now we will turn to our Q&A section of the panel. And our first question is from an anonymous user to the chief. The deputy chief is also welcome to answer this question. Once schools reopen, do you think truancy will be reinstated, and will it even be effective?
So thank you for that question. Truancy. So right now, truancy is not anything I am willing to consider at this point in time. This pandemic is such a fluid situation, and we're dealing with some unprecedented times, virtual schooling versus physical attendance. So right now, I am not even considering truancy in itself. If we are under normal circumstances, yes, I think truancy is in itself effective. It is only effective if you're picking the student up and bringing the student to school, not bringing them to a facility or something of that nature. We want to bring them to school where they will continue to get their education. But right now, truancy is not anything that we're considering. It has been suspended until further notice until we get through this pandemic together. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Chief Sean Ferguson. Our next question will come from our student panel. We will have Zion Kinney. Zion, please remember to state who your question is for.
This question is for the superintendent. What is the NOPD school safety strategy?
Thank you for that question. And
this question is for the superintendent. What is the NOPD school strategy safety strategy? Sorry.
Gotcha. No, not a problem. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Zion. So right now we have a program called of officers, a set of officers assigned to every district, known as school resource officers. They are the liaisons for every school within their district. They've established relationships with the schools to ensure there's a communication line directly to the captain over that district. And whatever is needed of them, if we can assist, we will assist at that time. But not only with that, we have created a level in which we can have an engagement opportunity when possible. The pandemic, of course, has been a factor in which we aren't able to do some of the things that we used to do. But through our community engagement division, which is led by Sergeant Merrill Merricks, and our community liaison officers, they work with our school resource officers, not only to provide security when needed, but also to provide education, especially from a law enforcement standpoint, and an opportunity for positive interaction between our department and our youth in itself.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Chief Sean Ferguson. And now we will go to Mr. Jeff Hood for the next Q&A question.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mason. Next question is for the judge. Can you explain mandatory minimum sentencing and why it is important not to end up standing in front of a judge?
All right, you there, Mr. Hood? Thank you.
I am.
I'm unmuted. In fact, mandatory minimums was something that I was going to bring up on a different type of question. But what people need to understand is there are certain crimes. There are certain crimes. The one that comes to mind at the top of my head is a felon in possession of a firearm. There are certain crimes that there's no discretion on the part of the judge or jury, if in fact there's a jury case, where if a person is convicted of a crime, that person has to serve the mandatory minimum sentence. On the felon with a firearm, it's a mandatory 10 years. So if you have any type of felony in your background, and in the United States or here in Louisiana, it can be a felony from any of the other 49 states. If the matter is considered a felony in Louisiana, then in fact, you possess a firearm, you are facing a mandatory minimum of 10 years. In addition to this, Mr. Hood and everyone else, and I've been reversed on, well, not reversed, the matter's been sent back to me for correction. There's also a mandatory minimum $1,000 fine. So if a guy's going to do 10 years, how's he going to come up with $1,000? But the law says it's a mandatory $1,000 fine in Louisiana. But, I'm sorry. So the question kind of begs the lack of discretion on the part of the judge. Again, when it comes to, and I'm certain our youth have heard of the multiple bill. If you haven't, some of you may refer to it as the 3 strikes rule. If you've got a mandatory, if you have prior felonies and the prosecutor decides he wants to treat you as a multiple offender, again, there are mandatory minimums involved in that particular sentence. So on a simple possession of cocaine case, it was 0 to 5. I think it still is. The probation period changed. On a multiple bill, the standard was always, if they filed one multiple bill, it was a mandatory minimum of 30 months. One prior conviction makes you what we call a double. If you've got two prior felonies, that will make you a triple. The mandatory minimum on the simple possession of cocaine then would be, instead of 30 months, which is 2.5 years, it would be 40 months, 3.5 years. Then it goes up to something that we call a quad bill. If you are a 3-time felon and you can get convicted of any felony, the mandatory minimum in Louisiana starts at 20 years. Some things are mandatory life if they can prove that you are a 3-time felon. And that's pretty much how the mandatory minimums work here in Louisiana. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, that came in from the Q&A, so we hope that it answered their question as well.
Yeah, if someone else has something, we can elaborate on that as well.
Go ahead, Mason. Let's take another question from the youth panel.
Thank you, Criminal Court Judge Ben Willard. Our next question will be from Leo Williams from our student panel. Remember, please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
This question is sent to the superintendent. My question is, what areas need the most reform in the criminal justice system, in your opinion?
So thank you for that question, Leo. Let me start by saying that first and foremost. So it varies from, of course, city to city, state to state, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Here in New Orleans, I know what we're working together with our judges as well as our district attorney's office to ensure that we are putting a great system in place that is one that is pleasing to the victim and witnesses, as well as holding the accused accountable. And we also include the Office of Public Defenders in that conversation as well. So some of the challenges are what the judges already alluded to. Some of the laws that are on the books, bottom line, the laws that are in place, and are they fair across the board to everyone? You know, should everyone pay a bond set at $10,000 if you can't necessarily afford that $10,000, or you do not necessarily have access to that type of money, or you have access to someone who can assist you with that amount of money? So that is one of the challenges that we're facing. The other challenges that we face from a New Orleans Police Department, from a law enforcement standpoint, is we find ourselves in some ways, some instances, spinning our wheels or by rearresting the same individuals. There's not something that we plan on doing. It's not anything that we look forward to doing. It's not anything that we're happy about doing. But in an effort to bring justice to the victims of various crimes, we find ourselves rearresting some of the same individuals. So it is an issue that's bigger than just the criminal justice system in itself. We have to talk about economic opportunity. We have to talk about educational opportunity across the board so that we do not see the same habitual offenders falling into the same stagnant place that would cause them to, again, have an interaction with us at the police department. So it is a bigger picture. I hope I'm answering your question, but it's a bigger picture than just the criminal justice system in itself that we have to look at to move our community forward and with some of the things that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. Our next question will come from me. The next question is directed to Deputy Chief Otho Sandifer. The question is, what has changed since NOPD has been involved with the consent decree?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's a number of things have actually changed within our agency, from our uses of force to revamping the academy, to audit and data-driven management. And so we, as a department, remain as ambassadors for reform and innovation dialogue. Even as far as I recall the 8 for 8, our department instituted all of those long before 8 Can't Wait was ever instituted, such as the prohibiting of the chokeholds, warnings before any type of deadly use of force, duty to intervene as well. And so comprehensively, again, we revamped our entire academy, which starts with our policy. And so we have changed over 200 plus policies within the New Orleans Police Department, which of course, helps us with our training and what leads us as an agency in constitutional policing, as well as procedural justice. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have arrived, because we know that reforms are ongoing and that we have to take a long, hard look at ourselves, both with policy, both with training, and that also starts with involving the community as well. And so, again, the systems and structures that we do have in place right now will afford us the opportunity to keep all of these reforms institutionalized throughout the life of the consent decree, as well as beyond any reforms. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Mr. Horn.
Our next question will come from our student panel, and it will be directed to Anthony Morrow.
Can you explain what your nonprofit organization is doing or planning in the community?
Right now, we're actually working on an event that we have set up for the end of the month. Actually looking for a venue right now. We close to getting one so far, but to help people specifically where I'm from in my neighborhood, West Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to help people get registered to vote, and also just giving them knowledge on voter suppression and just trying to educate people, especially where I'm from, because we traditionally one of the worst neighborhoods, but it's also got a lot of potential. And obviously with gentrification and stuff going on, I'm trying to keep most of us in our own community, but also help educate and bring more opportunities for people, especially the youth. You know, the parents, some of them got to work, kids have school. Obviously, with COVID going on, everybody's life is shifted. So we try and do everything we can in terms of transportation. Like I said, we're looking for a venue right now. That's our latest kind of venture right now in terms of what we're doing here to get people locked in and knowledge and up to speed on everything that's going on, so that, you know, they're kind of ahead of the curve. That's number one. That's the biggest thing we have going on now with school not being really in. It's been more virtual. We haven't been able to do our mental health program that we had in the school called Hidden Valley, but we still did the back to school drive, whiteboards for the younger kids, school supplies, hygiene products. But, you know, now, you know, looking forward, you know, this is the number one thing we focused on now, is getting people up to speed on what's going on in terms of voting. So that's what we're doing coming up September 26th.
Thank you, Anthony Morrow. Our next question will come from Jeff Hood.
Thanks, Mason. This next question is actually coming from our PAL chapter in Nigeria, Africa. We're happy to have them on board and participating this evening as well. And their question is, please, is there any organization like Judicial Commission in the U.S. that disciplines judges, that allows his judgment to be wrongly influenced? And I'm going to send that to our judge on the panel.
Thank you for that, brother. Mr. Hood, I appreciate the question. You're sending me questions all the way from the motherland, so I hope I can get it right. I hope I can get it right. Yes, there is actually Office of Special Counsel. The Office of Special Counsel here in Louisiana is the discipline arm for a judge who may have found him or herself on the wrong side of an issue. When it comes to a lawyer, there's an office called Disciplinary Counsel, and they impose infractions when a lawyer violates the rules of ethical responsibility. So if a judge, case in point, we actually have at the University of Reno in Nevada, the Judicial College, where most new judges find themselves are given an opportunity upon being elected. They are given an opportunity to seek guidance and to receive information in a classroom setting. And it's located, as I mentioned, in Reno. They actually tour around the state as well. I'm sorry, around the country. And we also have seminars that take place here in Louisiana in all different cities. So if a judge finds himself, let's say, the thing that came to mind often was in Nevada, because some of us, well, we're pretty much adults here. In Nevada, state of Nevada, prostitution is legal. There was a judge who actually went to one of the local houses because he was engaging in activity in Nevada that was legal, but he was a judge from the state of Minnesota. This was just to advise everybody. He was from the state of Minnesota. So even though when he visited this house of ill repute to engage in prostitution, it made the newspaper because he had gotten into a dispute about what the fee would be. It made the newspaper. The newspaper in Nevada was read probably by his political enemies back in Minnesota. Minnesota then came down with discipline against the judge because even though the activity was legal in Nevada, it was not legal in Minnesota. So the Office of Special Counsel or its counterpart in Louisiana came down on him, disciplined the guy, and he may have actually been removed from office. So it can be something as simple as a public censure, a private slap on the wrist. It can involve additional education. It can involve a suspension from office with or without pay. And there are some judges who paid the ultimate price and were basically removed from office because of violations regarding their oath. In fact, I am, and I don't like talking about it much because I don't like harping on people's bad luck, but I am the recipient of a judge who did not conduct their business properly because there were multiple trials that took place in my section of court prior to my being elected. My predecessor was conducting trials, but had an issue regarding her administrative duties because she was not keeping the records proper. So there were multiple murder cases that would go up on appeal. Upon a conviction of murder, you serve life. That person has an automatic appeal to the Court of Appeal and then ultimately to the Supreme Court. What happened was the Court of Appeal was in a position where it could not review the trial record because there were no transcripts available on multiple occasions. So that meant even though the conviction was proper in front of a jury, all of those cases had to be retried because a person is entitled to an automatic right to a new trial. And what happens in the second trial? Years later, evidence is lost, memories fade, witnesses are unavailable to be accounted for. After about 5 or 6 murder convictions that were reversed, the Supreme Court stepped in and said enough was enough. Even though she was conducting her duties as conducting the trials, when conducting the trials, she was not performing her administrative duties properly. Supreme Court stepped in, she was removed from office, the seat became available and vacant, and that's the seat I won back in 2002.
Right.
So I'm assuming in Nigeria, they must have some type of office like that. But here in Louisiana, it is extremely busy in terms of the number of cases and the number of judges that receive discipline. And I'll say this, Mr. Hood, to the people back in Nigeria, the thing about judges being disciplined, unless and until it becomes to the Supreme, unless and until it goes to the Supreme Court, it's all confidential. The record remains sealed until, like I said, it goes to court.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I wanted to have a quick question for Deputy Chief Sandifer. Should cultural competency training be a required component of police training? If yes, should this be mandated by the state or left to individual police departments?
Thank you for the question. And so what we have here in New Orleans, we have cultural diversity in our training. I can't speak for other jurisdictions as far as their mandates are concerned and how it should be instituted. But here in New Orleans, we pride ourselves on having that cultural diversity training plus implicit bias training. And what that does is it allows individuals who are not from New Orleans, as well as the locals who have joined our police department, to hear from the different cultures. And as the superintendent has spoken to you earlier, we have a myriad of cultures within the New Orleans Police Department. We have cultures within cultures within the New Orleans Police Department. So it's extremely important for individuals to understand the communities that they actually are serving. And so I would recommend that many other agencies take this upon as a part of their curriculum so that they can have a better understanding of the communities that they are actually serving. because that's their main focus, is to serve those individuals within their jurisdiction.
Okay. And there's one other from the chat as well.
Our next
And
question.
this is for Anthony Morrow.
Leo Williams, please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
I don't think Mason heard you, Jeff.
That's okay. That's okay. Keep going. You good?
Sent to Mr. Merrill. Question is, what is your opinion on professional athletes using their platform to bring awareness to social injustice, racism, and police brutality?
I think it's very important, and you know, these guys made a stand when they took that. You know, they boycotted for that couple days. They got the owners to all come down to the bubble and have those tough discussions that they've been avoiding for decades. So I really appreciate all my brothers in the NBA standing up. Not just them, you know, Cap, Eric Reed, all those guys that played in the NFL as well, that are making a stand. The WNBA, you know, I think they might have made the hardest push in terms of, you know, activism and being active and making a strong statement. As people know, the NBA is like 85% African American. So the fact that you got a guy like LeBron James who's spearheading the whole movement, you know, it makes it that much easier for guys to fall in line. I was proud to say I played with a lot of those guys, some of them on their team, and, you know, competed against them for 10 years. And I can really appreciate how they made that stand. But also along with that, it's got to be more than just that, or the jerseys, the back of the jerseys names, or Black Lives Matter on the court. We also, like I said, got to educate our communities and our youth on the importance of voting, and our people on the importance of voting, and the importance of getting lawmakers to make certain changes in our neighborhoods. But it's not just going to be with a name on the back of a jersey. So the fact that they're opening up arenas for voting sites for communities where voter suppression is more relevant, that's big, and that's important to me. And I think we got to continue to speak out, not just right now because we're in the times we're in. We got to be having that fight 365, 24/7. So I'm proud of them. I'm always doing my part before all this and now, and continuing in the future. So it's huge.
Thank you, Anthony Morrow, our celebrity guest. Thank you so much. Our next question will be for Deputy Chief Otha Sandifer. And this question is, for the individuals who don't know or understand the A Can't Wait, can you identify and give a brief explanation of this process, please?
Sure. So thank you for the question. The A Can't Wait. These are basically 8 requirements that individuals want police departments to take upon themselves. And so, as I stated earlier, our department has long instituted these, the first of which I believe it's going to be to ban chokeholds. Our department prohibits chokeholds, period. It requires de-escalation, where it's possible to communicate with such subjects, maintain distance, otherwise eliminated the need for the use of force. Also require warning before shooting. Our department goes beyond that. Not only do we require warning before shooting, we require warnings before any uses of force. So there's no limit to our department's requiring warnings. I believe the other is exhaust all alternatives before shooting. And so again, within our department, we require that before resorting to any lethal force. There are warnings that should be given. Let's see, I believe there is the duty to intervene. There is in our policy, as well as within our EPIC program, that our officers are required to step in and stop another officer from using excessive force. Shooting at moving vehicles. Our department has long prohibited shooting at moving vehicles, because we know that if you shoot at a moving vehicle and the driver is actually hit, now the vehicle becomes a weapon in and of itself, and it becomes a projectile. The use of force continuum, I believe, is another one. We teach the use of force continuum in our training facility at the academy. In other words, to give our officers an idea of what level of force that they must actually use in order to combat resistance. For example, if a person is passively resisting, of course, you cannot resort to the use of a taser. You cannot resort to the use of a baton, in other words. And I believe that it's number 8, reporting. We mandate that not only do the officers who are involved in the use of force report that and write a report, but also the supervisors have to go to the scene of which these uses of force have been taking place, and of course interview the subject who the force was used against. And the supervisor then writes a report as well, and that's submitted up to our Public Integrity Bureau, who of course looks at that, who is overseen by a civilian deputy chief. I believe that was 8. I think that was all 8 of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that answers everyone's question. But again, our department take a hats off to the men and women of the New Orleans Police Department for embracing these reforms long before the 8 Can't Wait substitute actually requested that from other agencies.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Otha Sandifer. And now we'll go to our CEO, Jeff Hood.
Yes, we have another question, and this is for Superintendent. It says, where I live, the PAL officers are involved in many sports programs with the kids in the neighborhood. Do you think that more PAL officers would help to calm the violence that is happening?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Hood. So I think any positive interaction with our youth will help curb some of the youth violence. But definitely when you have a police officer that is involved in that interaction in a positive way, that begins a foundation or a relationship, unlike any other, with regards to having respect for the officer and the officer having that same respect for the community and the youth in itself. But our kids today need that positive interaction. They need that help. And we as an agency, definitely, we as a profession, law enforcement in itself, definitely try to take every opportunity that we can. So through PALS, this has created that environment for us to have that special relationship through either activities or mentorship or educational opportunities or through athletics. It's still a positive interaction that our youth need, because I'm a firm believer it takes a village to raise our kids, and law enforcement is just as much a part of that village as anyone else to help raise and culture, raise our kids to be positive individuals in our country.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. Our next question will come from our student panel. Brandon, please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
My question is directed to the judge again. Do you believe that outside prosecutors should be brought in to prosecute police instead of the district attorney, since police have to work so closely with them and that could lead to bias in trial?
Okay, thank you for your question again. I guess I can say yes, and I can say no. Let's look at it from both sides of the perspective. If in fact the prosecution can be fair and impartial, then I think they've crossed the threshold as to whether or not they should bring the case forward. You do raise a very good issue in the sense that you're saying the two entities have to work closely together. That's why in the past, pretty much every modern day district attorney had a policy of, before going forward on any particular case involving a police officer accused of a crime, they would present the matter to a grand jury. That's at least 9 ordinary citizens who would make the determination as to whether or not charges would go forward. The citizens would make that determination. Now, the prosecution still has the authority to go forward if the citizens decide they don't want to press charges or they don't find something called true bill of indictment. So your question does present the quagmire and the problem from a perspective that if they can't be fair and impartial, then they shouldn't be a part of the case. But then again, if they can be fair and impartial, it's their job to go forward, and relationships and things like that are not supposed to be a part of them doing their job to the best of their abilities. Because not only will the police officers have a relationship, sometimes the defense attorneys may have a relationship with some of the people involved in the case. Sometimes it may involve a judge. There have been some matters where I didn't feel as if, I always feel as if, I'm sorry, I can always be fair and impartial, but it might give that hint of somebody looking at it saying it's improper, which going back to what Mr. Hood asked earlier, where a judge can be disciplined. If it appears to be improper, I sort of take the road of caution and pull away from it. So if in fact it appears as if the prosecution can't be fair and impartial, then absolutely they should pull back and allow another jurisdiction. And most times here, it'll be the Attorney General stepping in. And we've had some of those cases. I don't think I've got any ongoing now, but I've had several of those matters where the Attorney General would come in, because there have been a couple of prosecutors in the last year that were, well, I can think of one. It involved a matter of domestic violence, and the DA pulled out of the case. Now, as a prosecutor, I went forward. It was probably one of the most famous matters that I handled, one of the most high profile. It involved a police officer who, in fact, was accused of multiple rape charges, and it was his fourth trial after 3 mistrials. We felt as if we were safe going forward. I didn't have any biases involved. I didn't really know the guy. So if there are relationships that are going to put you in a position where you might fall, or your integrity might be questioned, the best and the safest way to avoid that is to pull out of the case and allow another jurisdiction to come in. Doesn't always happen, but at least that tool is there. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much, Criminal Court Judge Ed Willard. Our next question comes from the Q&A section. Kyler T. from New York, PAL, has a question. This is open to either of the chiefs, deputy chief or superintendent. There is talk about having social workers or psychologists respond on certain calls to police. How is this even possible when oftentimes these incidents happen all hours of the day and night, and would not the violence put them at risk?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Mr. Horn. I'll answer that question. There are many conversations as to how we can reduce unnecessary police interaction. We have social workers assigned to our department, to various districts throughout our department, that we don't necessarily allow them to respond to a hot scene. They will respond when called upon, to provide some resources to the family of the victims and or witnesses, or even the accused in itself. But we are having more conversations about some of the non-criminal calls in which you can have professionals to respond to them, meaning some of the mental health calls that we receive many of. And of course, in some instances, it can be dangerous, I guess you would say, but there's a certain level of understanding that these professional psychologists or medical experts would have when dealing with a mental patient, but they should not allow them to respond on their own. If it is a hot call, we would still have officers to respond or assist as necessary. So there are some programs out there now that we're looking at ourselves to see if we could actually participate in that, so we can have a proper response to the mental health crisis, to homelessness, to some of the wellness checks calls that we are receiving. But Some instances I do not agree, meaning like some of the domestic violence calls, although it may be classified as a disturbance, I do not think non-commissioned personnel should respond to that because it can escalate rather rapidly. So, but there are definitely some pros to having non-commissioned personnel or medical experts respond, these certain experts to respond to certain calls to assist and reduce police interaction or unnecessary police interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. Our next question will come from Andrew of our student panel. Please state who your question is directed to. Thank you.
My question is directed to the deputy chief, and it's, could you explain the use of force continuum in more depth?
Sure. So the use of force continuum basically is, you think of it as like a pyramid. And so there are different levels of force. First of all, there's police presence, right? Officer shows up on the scene. That's considered the first level. And then, of course, then there's hands-on, and then there's the taser, and then there's impact weapon, and then there's deadly force. And so within the training at the academy, with our use of force continuum, we teach whatever level of force that is used against the officer. They cannot use a higher level of force. For instance, like I gave the example, if someone is passively resisting, if they're just rigid and standing straight, there is no reason that an officer should use a taser or an impact weapon on that particular individual. And so if an individual is just saying, I'm not going where you want me to go or doing what you want me to do, of course, we teach that your presence should have some sort of level to get this person to act on your lawful authority. However, if not, use your voice, use your art of persuasion to get this particular individual to comply. Because in essence, what we do, right, we are a lot safer, and that person is a lot safer to voluntarily comply to any lawful order that the office is importing upon them. And also, we teach within our force of use continuum that everything that we do, right, is to maintain the sanctity of human life. And I sincerely hope that that answers your question, if you quite understand the use of force. That's in a very nutshell, but it's a little bit more complex. We could take probably till 10 o'clock news for me to go over the entire nuances of it. But just for your practical purposes, that's the use of force.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Otto Sandifer. Our next question will come from our celebrity guest, Anthony Morrow.
Yeah, it's for Deputy Chief and Superintendent. Probably about 2 months ago, we had a workshop here with CMPD, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and I asked them the question that I want to ask y'all. I know I believe it's 6 months before you get a badge and a gun with training, if I'm not mistaken. And I asked, what was the extent of the background checks and how far did they go with some of these police officers? And I also asked, what's the selection process when you talk about where certain officers get selected or delegated to the places that they go within the city? So they told me that in an area like where I grew up, they would send quote unquote a high performance officer. And I tried to get clarity on what that was. And there was an officer that put in more time with training from what I understand. So I didn't get too much clarity on those questions that I asked, but I wanted to ask y'all, what's the process with New Orleans?
So I can answer that. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for what your nonprofit is doing for our community, and you know that helps across the country, because voting is a very important thing. I agree with you that our youth is missing out on and do not have a full understanding of in itself. So thank you for what it is that you do. To start with the first question, our background, man, our background process is so extensive. We average 30 to 45 days of background investigation on each applicant. that come through our department, and it is the most stringent one in the state of Louisiana. And the reason I can say that is because there are often times in which individuals will not be hired because we've identified something in their background that they would not be hired by us, but they can go and be hired by the state police, or they could be hired by one of our neighboring agencies. So we have a very extensive, intensive background investigation to ensure that we are getting a quality officer on our department and to serve our community. With regards to assignment, yes, you're right. 6 months of 6 months of educational training, which we would call controlled training in a controlled environment at the training facility. However, after that, you have 6 months in the field. That's 6 months in the field. When I took over the department, it would be you would go to one district and then you move around and move around. We started trying to put them in one district and just learn that community and then learn another community. So then once you are assigned to a certain district, you have a wealth of knowledge of our community or the diversity of the city of New Orleans. So how they're necessarily chosen, we don't have any particular ways to how they're assigned to a specific district. It's not male, female, black, white things, anything of that nature. What it is, you know, we look at the officers and what we'll try to allow our captains to see if they feel that, hey, if he or she feels he wants more diversity with females and more diversity with males, we try to allow them to do some picking. I hate to say it's like a lottery pick, but they're picking in officers. But for the most part, the field operation chiefs identify who is going to be assigned where. Now, once they move from that patrol division and say they want to be in a specialized unit, detective or whatever, we go through what is called a knowledge, skill, and ability protocol, in which they have to meet a certain standard. They have to go through an interview process, and they have to have X amount of time of experience before they move on throughout their career at any level of specialized units. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, did I forget anything, Chief Sandifer?
No, you hit everything right on it.
Thank you.
Hey, real quick, Mason, before you throw it to, this is Jeff, before you throw it to another question, Anthony had another commitment as well, and he put that off to spend time with us, so he had to jump off. So if there's any other Anthony Morrow questions, we're going to need to shelve those for now until another time. But I just wanted to let everybody know that he had another appointment that he had to run to as well. Okay, thanks, Mason. You can take it.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everything.
Yes, thank you.
Definitely
On behalf
keep in touch.
thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to have this discussion and be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Morrow. You need anything here in New Orleans that we can assist you with, please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely.
And
I got
let me say this before he jumps too quick. Anthony is actually a former PAL kid. Well, he's still a PAL kid. He's always a PAL kid.
Oh, yeah.
But he's a PAL kid as well. So he grew up
Yeah.
in PAL here in Charlotte as well. So he's one of us. So.
That's right. That's right. Always.
Good deal.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Mason.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from the Q&A section from Anonymous. For Superintendent Sean Ferguson, what is the biggest challenge the NOPD faces while here in New Orleans amid the pandemic? How are you and your department going about fixing the issue?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horn. The challenge that we're facing is trying to uphold the law and being engaging, meaning deter or prevent crime without spreading the virus in itself, meaning our officers either getting the virus or they, are having the virus or giving it to someone else. So, we're trying to have that social distance, but in our line of work, they do understand that we cannot necessarily always socially distance ourselves from the problem. So that is some of the issues that we're kind of dealing with. but it has not become a major issue. Our biggest thing is trying to work with like Judge Willard and all, and our criminal justice partners in not arresting individuals, but still holding these individuals accountable, issuing summons in lieu of arrest. But in trying to do that, we're trying to make sure the accused is held accountable for their actions. So we kind of walk a gray line or a narrow line, a narrow line with that, because it's kind of hard to enforce the law, but also and try to keep our officers safe and the community safe from this invisible virus that we're facing.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. Our next question is directed to Deputy Chief Otha Sandifer. And the question is, what community events has your department participated in to seek progress toward building a relationship with your city and to build trust?
Thank you for that question. So our department has participated in a number of events. We've gone to many peace walks where we were hand in hand with individuals with Black Lives Matter. We participated in a number of food drives where we fed the community during this pandemic for individuals who have lost their jobs and are able to support themselves. And so not only with the communities of New Orleans, which is predominantly African American, but also in the Hispanic community, as well as the Vietnamese community. And even right here with PALS, that is a part of our community engagement, of course, with our youth dialogue, which is headed by Sergeant Merrill Merricks, gives us an opportunity to engage, such as this in PALS, but also within the schools, where the officers can actually communicate and engage with the youth in different schools and have a forum to voice their opinions and voice their concerns.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Otha Sandifer. There's a follow-up question to this as well. Superintendent Sean Ferguson, I know you're familiar with the event I'm about to speak on. I'm not sure about Deputy Chief, but there's an event in the city called Cops versus Ninjas. Can you elaborate on what this event is and what it does for the community and what is its purpose?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that. It's something, one of our local business owners here in New Orleans, Sensei Jason Horn, reached out to myself, and at the time I was over the 2nd District, and Captain Ronnie Stevens, who's now retired, was over the 6th District. He reached out to us to create an opportunity of positive interaction, again, with involving the youth of our community and the officers that are serving that youth. And we had an opportunity to actually just have fun, get out there and do various karate exercises, cops versus the ninjas of the dojo, of the Access Martial Arts Dojo. And it was fun. And afterwards, we were able to have a conversation with the kids as well. And they had an opportunity by having that type of interaction through the karate techniques. It got them to relax a little bit and enabling them to actually have a positive conversation with us and be willing to talk with us. So it's something that has been going on for at least the last 4 years, and it continues on after I've left the 2nd, as well as Ronnie Stevens has left the 6th. So we like to thank them for always looking for ways to create that environment of positive interaction between our youth and our law enforcement officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Sean Ferguson. And now we will go to our CEO, Jeff Hood.
Okay, with this, first again, I want to thank everybody for participating. We're closing in on getting ready to close, but before we do that, again, this is from the Voices of Youth event. So what I would like to be able to do is, I'd like for each of the youth panelists, including you, Mason, to answer this question. As a youth in the community, what most concerns you or bothers you?
That's awesome. Thank you. I don't know, Mason heard you.
Okay, let's start. Well,
here's
Mason, we'll come back to you. We're gonna first go to Andrew Gary.
Responsibility that our community takes when it comes to certain activities that happen within our own community. Many times, individuals of our community like to blame police officers and law enforcement in our city for various different situations. I'm not going to speak on one in particular, but many situations that may have stemmed from the home and their household, but they never speak on that side of it. They usually just go straight to blaming. So that is one thing in our community that bothers me. Such as like behavior within teens or whatever. Usually the law enforcement is first to be blamed on why a student acts a certain way or a teenager does something, instead of pointing the finger, or not necessarily pointing the finger, but giving the responsibility to that household.
Okay. And if you can hear me, Andrew Gary, we're going to go to Andrew Gary next.
I think one of the biggest issues that I care about is just being able to vote. It's one of the most important parts of our democracy, and I'm just concerned by the fact that there are some people who are trying to limit people's access to the ballot box, not just in New Orleans, but across the country.
Okay.
And I just really find it disturbing that there are people who think that you can live in a democracy but still restrict people's right to vote.
Very good. Thank you.
I guess I could say what I'm most concerned about is the future. Just hoping that, things get better with how things currently are in the world as is. And that's about it.
Okay. Brandon?
I'm concerned about is like being around in the right environment, hanging around the right people, and making sure that you can grow up in a nice community and be able to make sure the future is better.
Okay. And is Zion?
One thing that I think bothers me, but I think we're working on solving right now, is the lack of communication between the community and the police. So I think that programs like this are really important in trying to bridge that gap that exists between the community and the police.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Just overall,
give me
police in my area.
I have a follow-up question for you. Give us a suggestion on what you think could be done to support more inclusion of these feelings that you guys are having or expressing right now. What are some things that maybe we as adults can look at to be able to consider and bring about change or difference?
I would say for our generation, as the adults of y'all generation, can you hold our generation more responsible? Not in terms of punishing us for certain things that we do, but definitely giving us more, giving us more spotlight on what we're doing. Like in terms of, as I spoke about, with not taking responsibility for our actions, just hold us more accountable verbally and showing us that this is what you did. You need to take accountability for your actions. For example, parents.
Okay. Did Leo, did you answer the previous question?
Our student panel.
Did Leo answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. For my issue, I think one thing that we should do is we should pass a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to vote, just blanketly, because right now we have a patchwork of laws and constitutional amendments that when added up, you would give everyone the right to vote, but as we see right now, not always true. And I think that that's an easy first step that we should take.
Okay.
Coming from, my age group, I think, the best thing is to keep doing things like this, giving us the ability to, speak out in these sorts of issues. Cause, if there's anybody right now who is like having a lot of, scattered emotion about what's going on, it's our age group. And so, just hearing how a lot feel about it, it definitely helps. I know that, being a part of this, these last few panels I've been on, it's been really liberating, to say the least, to have to talk to, about these issues that's going on right now. And I think that I should not be the only one being able to do this.
Very good. Any other questions or comments or concerns from the youth panel? Now, this is y'all's time, right? This is why we wanted to bring this to fruition, because we need to hear your voice. We need to hear and understand what some of your concerns are, and invite you to the table to be able to hear and express that. So, are there any other from our youth panel things that they may want to talk about or to bring up as a question to anybody on the panel, or just to comment? No? Okay.
That concludes our student panel portion. I don't think we have any more questions.
Okay, very good. So what we're going to do, again, I want to thank everybody for participating this evening. Especially want to thank Mason for stepping up and being our gracious moderator for the evening, doing a great job. And I know he's going to enjoy his time at Hampton University when he can finally get there and be a true student. But I also want to thank the remainder of our youth panelists. And I want to thank you for your courage and your willingness to come on and display your voice. We're going to continue to do these. We have another session from the Voices of Youth coming up on Monday. We're going to be live from Memphis, Tennessee. So all of you guys that are on, feel free to join us on Monday at 4:00 p.m. Eastern, 3:00 Central, and hear again from our youth, voices from our youth. I also want to thank our Superintendent Ferguson, Deputy Superintendent Sandifer, and our Judge Ben, and Anthony Morrow, and everybody else that participated. But I also want to thank, because it took people behind the scenes to make this happen. Again, I want to thank Microsoft, but I also want to thank Sergeant Merrill and Officer Jerry for their participation in helping to make this come to fruition and a reality. So with that, and I have this one last thing that I've been asked to ask the panel, and it's gonna have to be real quick, is, and I can't believe I'm actually even gonna ask this question, that someone asked me to write. I'm not gonna throw him under the bus, but he says he loves Willie Mae's fried chicken, but he heard there's a better spot in New Orleans. Is that true?
You got a few good places here in New Orleans.
Yes, sir.
Many.
Well, look, I had to ask, and he asked me to ask that question. But again, thank you guys so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you, Microsoft, for helping to produce and bringing this to fruition. Please join us on Monday from Memphis, and as we continue to display our voices of youth across the country. Thank you, everyone, and everybody have a great evening, and continue to wear your mask and be safe. Thank you, and National PAL thanks you.
Thank you,
Thank you all. Thank you, young people.
Great
Continue the
job.
great work. Great job, Mason.
Thank you to all of the moving pieces and everyone.
Are we off?